UNICEF works for every child, and our program areas, the focus areas that UNICEF focuses on the most are healthcare, protection, respect, and education. And obviously under each of those main pillars, there are a number of different subsectors, climate and gender equity. And so with each of those, you can only imagine the amount of stories and lived experiences that come through. And so it's our job, like I mentioned, to bring those stories closer to the US.
Great events create great brands. And it takes a village to put on an event that engages, excites, and connects audiences to your brand. And we're that village. I'm Alyssa.
I'm Paulina.
And I'm Rachel.
And you're listening to Great Events, the podcast for all people interested in events and marketing.
Hi, everybody. What is going on in the wide world of events? My name is Rachel, and welcome to another great episode of Great Events. I'm joined this week with an internal guest host, Elizabeth Powell, who is an industry solutions marketer for our nonprofit world, amongst other things. Elizabeth, before I introduce our guest, I want you to give a quick background on your role really quick.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Like many of our listeners, I imagine I once too was an event planner. I did it in the luxury wedding space. I've done it for universities, and I've done it for associations and nonprofits. Per transition with an MBA from Georgetown, now I help Cvent as a solutions marketer, which means I'm constantly listening to the trends and news and the challenges you face as a nonprofit event professional or marketer, and think about how we can provide better resources and solutions for you.
Very awesome. Well, cool. This is going to be a fun conversation today, as all of them are. But I have a good friend of mine, old friend of mine, Tyler Armstrong, who is the managing director of special events at UNICEF. Welcome, Tyler.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Tyler and I go way back to 2007, 2006. We were good friends when I lived up in New York and had many fun adventures together. Tyler also uses Cvent now, so we re-met again at Cvent Connect a few years back, and I reacquainted with him, but we hung way back in the day. I feel really old saying that now, but
yeah, I know. Such good times. And it was so cool to see Connect come through and to see you there as well.
Very cool. Well, I know for our listeners, we do a lot of corporate stuff on this podcast, but I'm very excited to have Tyler on today because we rarely do nonprofit, and Tyler has such a cool role at UNICEF. So Tyler, why don't you give our listeners just a little, the background of your, history, your role at UNICEF, and kind of what you bring to this great industry.
Well, thank you. And it's an honor to be here. So first of all, I'm with UNICEF USA. UNICEF USA is the fundraising and advocacy arm of UNICEF, which UNICEF is obviously the global children's organization, part of the United Nations. So I am in New York. I've been with UNICEF USA for 12 and a half years now. I'm the managing director. I oversee a team of producers, event planners, and we specialize in doing fundraising events that are both creating awareness and engagement and community building and advocacy for UNICEF. So really, it's our job to produce events that are going to reach audiences far and wide in the US. And mainly, and this is like our big goal, is to connect American audiences, US audiences, with the global work of UNICEF. So UNICEF works in 190 countries and territories worldwide. And most of us may never visit a lot of those countries. And so it's my job as a producer and my team's job to use events as a portal or a window into the lives of children and their families that are living around the world. So yeah, we've been for many years, for the 12 years that I've been a part of the team, we've been designing mainly large galas or formal seated fundraising events. We were mainly doing those pre-pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, like all of us, we had to pivot. We kind of did an assessment of our skill sets, the skill sets on the team. And we immediately just decided to start doing events very differently and inherently reaching wider audiences, different audiences than we were pre-pandemic. And that's kind of helped us guide a new strategy that we're now implementing moving forward. So that's my role in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have about any of.
I love it. I always say, event planning, we're not saving lives here, but you quite literally are doing that with your events and your event strategy. So maybe I should hold my tongue when I say event planners don't impact that, because I do think that a lot of event professionals and experience makers, however you want to call us, because we are a lot of different things under the umbrellas of planning, right? Do impact the lives. I love what you said about using events and experiences as a portal into others' lives. Like, how cool is that? One, can you just take us through like some of those different portals that you've kind of opened? I know you just talked about obviously the galas and things like that people know you for, but talk through some of the other things that you've done that have helped shed the light on folks that are within the spectrum of events, but also like have broadened that scope.
Yeah. So UNICEF works for every child, and our program areas, the focus areas that UNICEF focuses on the most are healthcare, protection, respect, and education. And obviously under each of those main pillars, there are a number of different subsectors, climate and gender equity. And so with each of those different pillars or program areas, you can only imagine the amount of stories and lived experiences that come through. And so it's our job, like I mentioned, to bring those stories closer to the US. I think be really surprised at all of the similarities that we'd see between ourselves and those going to school in other parts of the world, and some of the major differences too. And so the role that we play as event planners is really to make sure that we're making that emotional connection between those stories so that people can really immediately see those similarities and differences. So one example would be during the pandemic. I mean, during the pandemic, we were really all facing the same types of global challenges when it came to education. Millions of kids, 2 billion kids on Earth were out of school. And so we were faced with a global pandemic, and it was a time when, school looked very differently. So the portal that we created during the pandemic was setting up virtual events where we could show or showcase students taking us on a tour of their school, their home, what their school looked like at that time, the different ways that they were playing and interacting differently. So that's just one example.
That is so cool. Like the backstage thing is really, really nice. I mean, it's helpful to see and like create attention and awareness around those things. Otherwise, you're just kind of shouting into space at things without giving people, hey, this is what's happening. This is why you need to care or help. Right. So, I mean, on that side of your events, your goals, let's talk about you as a business owner for UNICEF for a second. So your goals for obviously is shedding a light on the children and the different environmental factors and things like that. But for your events and driving awareness to that, I'm sure you're doing more than just creating awareness. You're also hitting financial goals and getting that information to major stakeholders. Can you give us a little bit more behind the scenes peek into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main ways that we were fundraising that really haven't changed this year. Right now, we're planning a gala that will take place on November the 28th on Giving Tuesday. So that will take place in New York at Cipriani on Wall Street. The basics of the operations of planning that fundraising gala are we work with volunteer event committees and core leadership members that volunteer their time to reach out to their networks to sell tables and tickets to attend the event. The event is an exclusive one night only event where we sell tables for starting at $30,000 and going up to sell sponsorships to 100,000, 250,000 for a presenting sponsorship. We really rely on our board members who also volunteer their time to support the organization. We have regional boards and a national board with UNICEF USA made up of really like people from every industry who are coming together to volunteer their time to reach out to their networks to support the efforts of UNICEF and what they're doing for every child. So we're currently in the process of working with those groups to sell tables and tickets to this event on November the 28th. And the structure of the event will be a stage program. There will be people who are youth voice and people who are speaking from the stage about UNICEF's work. We'll use film and different audiovisual tools in order to make sure that we're building those, as you call them, like portals into the lives of others that evening. And then we also will have a performer who will donate their time to entertain our guests too. So in the past, we've had Diana Ross, we've had Mariah Carey, Pink, Katy Perry, Walk the Moon perform at our annual event. So this will now be in its 18th annual year, the UNICEF Gala at Cipriani Wall Street on the 20th of November. So we're currently on sale, and our website will launch next week, and we'll be announcing the talent in the next couple of weeks to a month.
Elizabeth, do you have $30,000? Do you want to go in on it?
Well, I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, if we just pull our resources together. Tyler, you raised such a good point about, it sounds like this is the real showcase event of the year for your team. And a lot of attention and planning goes into this. And you've been, your organization's been doing it now for 18 years. Sounds like you've been along the ride for a number of those as well. What keeps you guys coming back to the drawing board with this event? What have been some of the biggest innovations with your gala in the past couple of years?
Great question. So coming back from the pandemic, I think we will all agree that we're in a different place. And I think that people's interests have changed a great deal. And so people are really wanting more immersive experiences. They really want to not be spoken at or spoken to, but engaged as part of the conversation that we're having. They want to feel more of a connection to the children and their families that we're speaking about from the stage. And so we're using technology in many ways to make sure that we're creating a more personal or personalized connection to those audience members in the room. They've also shared with us that it's as much about learning what's going on in the world as it is about connecting with one another in the room. So that was something that was like definitely missed, and something that people were craving during the pandemic, that they wanted to make sure that we work on building our community of really like the engagement is just as important as the fundraising. And people with UNICEF and the board members and people who have been involved in the event for that many years, they get so excited about bringing in new audience as well into the fold to introduce them to the work of UNICEF. I think that it's not common that we hear that, or it is common that we hear that people have said, I know I'm familiar with UNICEF. Like, I've heard of UNICEF. What do you do every day? Is it something to do with kids? And so I think that events like these are a time for people to connect over the UNICEF mission and to give back. And so that's really one of the reasons why we've been consistently doing our event on Giving Tuesday for many, many years. We were actually always the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and then Giving Tuesday became a thing. And we saved the date, and we continue to just ask people to reserve that day for us. And so it's been incredibly successful. We've raised millions and millions of dollars through the gala over many years. And so this year we're set to raise $4 million. And we'll achieve that goal through both table sales, ticket sales, and then sponsorships. And then we also have a live appeal that takes place that night in the room, where people can fund the need and they can raise their hand during a think of it more like a live auction moment, but instead of purchasing things for yourself, you're able to give back. So they can pledge to send an emergency relief SUV truck to the field that can reach kids that are living in parts of the world that are difficult to reach. You can pledge a water pump, a community water pump that provides clean water to a community that is not just an immediate need, but something that can serve a community for many, many years to come. It's gifts like these that kind of give me chills, because it's not just about one generation. It's actually like providing clean water for generations to come. It's so impactful. And I think that that's what really keeps my team and I going.
Right. It's not just a KPI on your sheet. It's actually impacting a life, which is so much better.
Yeah. And even like just creating that opportunity, not even knowing where the cap is, like that evening, that it doesn't just stop with the sponsorship, but that you have the power to create the atmosphere to drive change in that moment is really, really cool. And I think something completely unique, the nonprofit event space, that makes it challenging, but also really exhilarating and rewarding. I'm really curious. It sounds like you listen to your attendees and there's a group that kind of is really invested and comes back year after year, and maybe they're even part of your marketing. How have the role of like these volunteer leaders or organizers evolved, and how do you rely and coordinate with them as part of your outreach and engagement for that event?
So this is something that we're talking about a lot now, that we have a core group of supporters that attends the event year after year. We have data that shows that around like 33% we have retention year over year from like a core group of supporters that's an average across all of the events that we do. And so the rest of that, the rest of the room is our new audiences that are coming back or coming to the organization new. And that's a testament to our board members, our committees who are working with us year after year to make sure that they're reaching out to new groups. So some years, I think board members are looking to new corporations. They're thinking about the UNICEF programs that are very top of mind in that year, and the companies that have similar interests. So climate and clean water and emergency relief, which companies are inspired to give or give back in those ways, where are the similarities in terms of just the scope from company to organization. So yeah, it's definitely like a moving target or cycle from year to year in terms of audience reach.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating how much nonprofit events really are brought together by the volunteers and the attendees themselves, right? It's such a galvanizing movement leading up to the event. How are you capturing on like new attendee engagement? Are you generating buzz like before the event through word of mouth? Are you following up with them after with like new content or updates? Talk us through how you keep the community going.
Well, this is a great question. I think like there are a lot of different tentacles, the ways that we do that. It's not just my team, but I work with a number of colleagues who generate buzz around the event. So I think a part of it is word of mouth. So the word of mouth of board members and event attendees that have attended the event in the past. We also have a really fantastic group of colleagues who are working on PR efforts and not just promoting the stage participants, so those performers or entertainers that are a part of the evening, but also the theme or the focus of the event. So this year, our focus is gender equity and girls and women. And so that's going to be like a big part of our messaging. And we're thinking about right now the different communities or community leaders who would want to be a part of that event. We're thinking about companies that have supported UNICEF in the past that have potentially lapsed, companies that have a special affinity for girls and women. We're reaching out to even the people that we're hiring to work with us. So our vendors are part of our outreach pool. Yeah, I think that, it's definitely like a big effort that goes into establishing like the buzz or like building the audience. But one other thing, it's not just the before. I think equal importance to the after. So after each event takes place, there's a team at UNICEF USA that is specifically focused on stewardship. So the minute that the event ends, we think about like, how can we give this event a very long tail? The event is an incredible investment for UNICEF USA. And so how can we maximize that investment? I think Cvent does a really good job of this too, by the way. Like you immediately leave Cvent Connect and you get like a survey and you're following up with the people who are attending that conference. And so UNICEF has a similar philosophy and we want to keep the engagement and the conversation going because you're learning a lot at a gala like the UNICEF Gala. And so we want to not only get people's thoughts about what their experience was, but also what was most interesting to them about the event. And then we have a great team of people just standing by to follow up on those interests.
I'm sure there's so much that you can do and learn about too that you need to be followed up with because you may have missed it at one of those amazing events that you produce.
That's something we're finding is the attendee journey, as we call it at Cvent, can look really different and unique within the nonprofit space when you're looking to engage as a volunteer or a donor, not necessarily like a one-time sales trade show conversion, right? It's a really different story. It's a really different model. And I love that you were able to just speak to that. Are there other ways in which your other events in your program kind of contribute to this long tail?
Yes. So we're diversifying currently our event strategy moving forward. And so in the past, as I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of more formal seated fundraising dinners. They tend to take place in the evening. They are traditionally called galas. In the future, we're looking at cultivation events. We found that some supporters really feel more comfortable in a more like intimate setting. They want to be able to ask questions of our CEO or specialists in the field of child education, nutrition. So we're hosting more intimate like cultivation events that are more geared towards like 50 to 60 people. We're doing 13 of those events around the country each year. And those are in addition to like the bigger gala that'll take place in November, which is for hundreds. So we're expecting like around 800 people then. And then as we look to the future as well, we're also looking at, we've seen incredible growth in community fundraisers. So third-party fundraisers, a lot of events are taking place where people are contacting us and they're offering to host an event on our behalf. So they can reach out to our team and say, I want to do a bake sale, or I have this great connection to a performer and I'd love to do a concert or for UNICEF. So the way that works is that there's a form that you can fill out on the UNICEF USA website. And we just ask some questions to make sure that our values are aligned with yours. And then you get approved to have use of our In Support of UNICEF USA logo. And you essentially can produce an event on your own on behalf of UNICEF, whether it be for your birthday or for Halloween. Then you can send us the check afterwards, whether there was money raised at the event or if it was merely an event for advocacy. So that is growing. This year we'll raise over 1.7 million just in those third-party fundraisers, where people are just sending us the net revenue for those events.
So cool. I love that. Activate your base and reach beyond that.
Yeah, I know. And like the stories that are coming from those events are just so impressive. Really, really great program.
It's got to be really cool to read about. You're like, oh, you're kind of taking on the role of what I do a little bit in a way. And you're getting to experience some of the fulfillment there.
We talked about that. I'm just kidding a little bit, but we talked about that, doing that internally at Cvent. Just say, here's how you plan an event. Here's event in a box for you. Just to our internal folks. not the same thing at all, but yours are way more important than that. I'm very curious about the nonprofit industry in the event space. Do you have, you know, associations that you're a part of that you're, can bounce ideas off each other? Are you collaborating with other nonprofits to kind of evolve and grow with them as well? I'm kind of blind to that side of things. I'm obviously in the industry with you, but I don't know enough about the nonprofit world at all.
Yeah, they're really fantastic forums. I'm on this huge email list with a lot of other nonprofit arts organizations in New York that are just constantly chiming in with ideas, referrals. There's a shared calendar where we make sure that there's no like big overlap on major events or opening nights. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that there's a week that goes by where someone isn't, saying like, hey, could you send us a list of producers that you worked with recently, or who are you using for fundraising on site? What platforms are working well for you? So there's just kind of like a constant thread of ideas that are very inspiring.
Well, that's got to be helpful too. It's like, who doesn't appreciate a good referral locally?
There was a lot of that taking place like during the pandemic. And I think that like as soon as someone like, as soon as someone sees that there's like a new, like more innovative way of doing an event, there's a lot of like info sharing. So I've been in touch recently with Charity Water, with Memorial Sloan Kettering. We had a lot of like just kind of like benchmarking conversations with different colleagues that Save the Children that are doing events differently or having a different approach to their style of events.
Wow, that's really cool. I like that you're, bouncing ideas off each other, all for a common good cause.
Yeah. It almost makes me think like, we get a lot of folks who tune into the podcast from all sorts of industries, but yours might garner some really specific attention given that we haven't had a nonprofit event professional on, I want to say in some time. Rachel can correct me if it's ever. What would you want to say to like the other nonprofit event professionals listening to you talk about your career and in your day-to-day life?
Well, here's a plug for you. I would say go to Cvent Connect because I was
That's
really
why we asked.
Yes. I was really so. First of all, I just some background about our relationship with Cvent. We started working together probably like 7 or 8 years ago. We're looking for a system that was going to track RSVPs and kind of streamline all of the data for our CRM for a summit where we were accepting reservations for students, for high school and college students, for board members, supporters, corporate partners. And the more we kind of like widened our audience for that summit, it took place in DC, the more complicated it got. We had like a pretty complex registration. And Cvent was, I think, a really fantastic system for that particular event. And the team was right there with us at customizing the various different, like the registration process. And so since we kind of like years have passed now and we've sunset that event since, but we're still using Social Table. And around the same time that we were working together in that like first few years, I went to Cvent Connect and I didn't really know what to expect. I envisioned that I would be like one of the only nonprofit representatives there. And I loved how you divided, certain areas of the conference to be divided by industry. And I was really surprised to meet so many other event leaders. Yeah. And there were a lot of collegiate organizations there that were using Cvent for their like alumni events. I thought that was great to get to connect with them. So anyway, again, shameless plug. I'm sad that I'm not going to be able to join you tomorrow, but best of luck with the conference. I think it's really so well done.
That's so great to hear. And you're talking to the, one of the huge conference planners, and then I manage a lot of our programming for the nonprofit industry. We're trying to go even deeper with specific sessions, and we've got 2 in-person meetups. But I'll put a plug for those listening. Our whole customer marketing team has completely revamped our Cvent community experience, which is our online user platform. There's all sorts of quick one-pagers and tips and tricks on how to do things. And there's an association and nonprofit user group that you can join. And it's essentially an industry forum to bounce ideas off of, to figure out how to do specific use cases or workarounds. And it's been really fun posting industry-specific content there as part of the discussion. So anybody listening can join.
Yeah, and we can link to these for our listeners online so you can get a little bit more information. But before we do that, Tyler, any closing remarks, advice, or anything else you want to share with our listeners in regard to nonprofit events, the industry, UNICEF in general? Just one final, statement from you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Again, so grateful to be included. I think, if I've sparked your interest about UNICEF USA, a plug that I'll give is that last year my team worked on a short film. It's a short documentary film called If You Have. It was one of the many projects that we did during this kind of void of live events in 2020 and 2021. And we had the opportunity to work with Academy Award winning director Ben Proudfoot. So the film is online. You can find it at ifyouhavefilm.org. It's, I think, a really, really fascinating 30-minute dive into UNICEF's work. For those that aren't as familiar with UNICEF's work, it really does a good job at capturing the intimacy and the emotional connection that UNICEF brings and the value that UNICEF brings to so many lives. So check it out if you have time. And I think we can chat the link, maybe.
Yeah, we can put it on our podcast page for our listeners.
Okay, cool. Amazing.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, I'm going to have to check out this film because this sounds really amazing. And the fact that you became an Academy Award winner, that's what I'm going to call it in my mind because you probably deserve it. I should have to check it out, and so should our listeners. But I just want to say thank you to Elizabeth and Tyler. Thanks for joining our podcast today. It's been a real treat having a real life superhero on the podcast. So thank you for joining.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Major props. Thanks for all you do for the children in need around the world. You're my hero. And to our other superheroes listening, thanks for joining us. If you have any additional things you'd like to share with us or questions, send us a DM on LinkedIn or a note at greatevents@cvent.com. Thanks for tuning in to Great Events. See you next time.